everybody.
Morning.
There's several things I want to do before I get involved in my message this morning. And I'm not trying to fill in space because I can preach several hours on what I'm going to be talking about this morning. If there's somebody in the congregation this morning that I'd like to recognize. I understand her picture is in today's paper. I understand she graduated from high school this past week with straight A's, and I think that's an achievement. I was comparing my grades to that of Paige's. She graduated straight A's, and I graduated with C- average. But Paige, we want to recognize your great achievement. Congratulations on your high school graduation. By the way, she will be going to KCU next September. I think that's when they start, and she's going to be playing softball for them. She told me that she likes to play shortstop, and that means she has quite an arm. And I understand her boyfriend appreciates it. I'm sorry, I had to say that. And the next thing I want to say, I said a little bit earlier that I'm sentimental. I've been thinking back over this past week of things that happened in my life in relationship to my mother-in-law and my wife and my mother. I never will forget the time that right after Vera and I got married, we went to her home. We were going to Kentucky Christian University now. It was college at the time. We went home for a special occasion. We had to ride the bus. And I was sitting at the kitchen table talking to everybody. The first thing I knew, I got hit in the arm and knocked off the chair I was sitting on. It was my mother-in-law. And what happened, Vera's sister was going with a gentleman that she didn't take care of her. And we came out in the bus together. And when she hit me and knocked me off the chair, she says, "That's where I'm bringing Buddy out with you." And then we all had a good laugh about it. But I was wondering this morning about if you have something you would like to share with the congregation concerning your mother, or if you are a mother, something that you would like to share concerning your child, son or daughter. If you do, just raise your hand and I'll recognize you and you can speak up if you wish. Marilyn?
From the time I can remember, my mother always was a Christian mother. No matter if she had many adversities in her life, many health issues, but that's where my faith came from. She taught me from a little, like I said, that's all I can remember. I mean, my brother and I both probably were babies, and I also took my children. And I had a double blessing because I was told one time in my life I'd never have children. But the Lord, we prayed, and I asked Him for one child, and then I got a double blessing for both my children.
By the way, I never told you this before, but you know, Steve was the result of a prayer service. We were in church camp, and Vera was the dorm mother, and I was working with Dean, and I was teaching. And Vera, in one of the nights, told them that we wanted to have children, but God had not blessed us yet. So without her knowing it, without my knowing it, the ladies that were on camp at that particular time prayed one night in a special prayer meeting. They called that we would get pregnant. And sure enough, Steve was born 10 months later. So we say that was a result of that prayer service. Any other comments? Any other? And by the way, when you were talking, I got thinking about Timothy's mother and grandmother, how they passed on their faith right on down. Anybody else? Speak up. Don't be afraid. We're family. Last week, when I dismissed the service, I told you I was going to preach from Ruth this week. At the time, I had 4 or 5, I'm not sure how many, different messages in my mind I had not chosen either one. And yet I was going to choose one of those that I was thinking about. And I want to tell you that right now, the message I want to preach is one that I didn't even have in mind at that particular time. God put something else in my mind, and I developed it. But I want you to think just for a few moments about Mother's Day. It was first observed in Grafton, West Virginia in 1908 by a woman by the name of Anna Jarvis, who set the day aside in order to be able to honor her particular mother and the faith that she had. They were Methodist. And then she started to campaign and advertise, and by word of mouth and by letters and by writing to the congressman and everything else. Eventually, in 1912, the government of the United States authorized the second Sunday in May as the official Mother's Day for us to observe and honor our mothers. I think about that and think about how impressive it was, but do you realize that today that Mother's Day is observed in over 40 different nations? Each nation has its own day, and that's not always observed on the second Sunday in May. And they have their own customs. And if you ever want something interesting to read, go to the internet on your computer and look at Mother's Day on it and follow the history and the customs and practices of some of the other countries and their observance of Mother's Day. It's quite interesting to read. You might enjoy it. But as I thought about this in the honor of Mother's Day, I couldn't help but think what we used for communion meditation this morning, that Jesus honored his mother. There was a special relationship between Jesus and his mother. That special relationship was seen in the fact that she followed him several different times in the Gospel Scriptures with her children, who were the four brothers and several sisters. We don't know how many sisters. But it was very, very interesting to see the connection and how Jesus and Jesus' mother, Mary, had that particular relationship. She was at the cross. And the only other follower of Jesus Christ that we know of that was at the cross was John. And then she appears in the upper room with the disciples of when they appointed Matthias as the apostle to take Judas's place. And she was with them and was in that particular prayer service that they were having. So there was that special relationship that they enjoyed down through life. I can think about this, and I think about mothers today. How God has instilled in mothers generally, not always, but how instilled in mothers that great love that they have for their children. I want to make a comment that I believe that my mother and my wife would have laid down their lives for their children. I think mothers will do that. I think that's a special love that mothers have. I think I was blessed with having a good wife that became a great mother for my three kids as they came up. Mothers are greatly esteemed. They're greatly respected. And as I began to search for an idea to preach for Mother's Day, I could not help but think of Ruth. Ruth, the book of Ruth was 4 chapters long. It's considered to be one of the greatest love stories ever written. It is also considered to be written by Samuel, although we don't know for sure. And if Samuel was the writer of the book of Ruth, he wrote it around 990 years before the birth of Jesus Christ. I got all those facts out, and I don't think I made a mistake in one of them. That's very interesting. The name Ruth means friendship or love, very closely related. I asked Ruth what her name meant. She looked at me and said love, but when I looked it up in the dictionary, it said friendship. I can't see the difference. It is a vital. I want you to notice that word vital. It is a vital emphasis in the history of the Jews during the time of the Judges. And that vital relationship that existed at that particular time, that vital thread, you can find the thread of God running right through the book of Ruth, as it is written. Now, I finally came to the conclusion this week that I was going to take each important character of the book of Ruth and talk about her just for a few minutes, or talk about them for just a few minutes. In the very first paragraph I have in my notes of each particular section, the Ruth is a little bit longer than the other ones, but it's taken from the Unger's Bible Dictionary, which I have on my computer. So I'm not going to be able to deal very much with those because it's not my original work, and I have to deal with my original work as I preach. But I want you to think about Naomi. Here was a Jewish woman of the tribe of Benjamin who was married to a man called Elimelech. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that name right. She had 2 children. One was named Mahon, the other was named Chili. Again, I'm not for sure I'm pronouncing those names right. I admire the Hebrew people for being able to pronounce the names of those of the Old Testament. I can't do it all the time right. But you look at this, and there was a famine occurred in Bethlehem or in Judea. And as that famine occurred, they had to have money. So they went down to Moab where there was work. And while they were in, this is Naomi and Elimelech, and as they were in Moab, her 2 children saw 2 of the Moabite women who were not Jewish. They were considered to be heathen or pagan or Gentiles. All the names that I mentioned right there, the 3 names, are kind of hard for a Jew to accept. As they were there, one of them married, Chili married a woman named Orpah, O-R-P-A-H, not spelled the way Miss Winfrey spells her name. And the other Mahon married Ruth. And contributing to the problems that they were having, all 3 men died. That would be kind of unusual, maybe a tremendous tragedy for the 3 women. And so Naomi decided that she was going to go back home where the famine was over and there was plenty of food and she relatives there to take care of her. And as she departed, she looked at Orpah and also Ruth and said, "You go back to your people and you follow the custom of your people, and your God will be your God and my God will be my God," and so forth. Orpah went back, and then you find that Ruth made a commitment. She used that famous term, which saying that we find in Ruth, the 1st chapter, 6 verses 16 and 17. And Ruth said, "Entreat me not to leave you, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Where thou diest, I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me." What a commitment. Here she was willing, we'll talk more about this later on, willing to give Ruth her life. To me, reading into this just a little bit, I think Ruth was thinking a little bit about caring for her mother-in-law for whom she cared deeply. But let's look back to Naomi. I think in what we find in the book of Ruth concerning Naomi, she demonstrated a love for all, especially towards Ruth and Orpah. You go back to your people. Well, telling them to do this, well, I think was an act of love. I may be wrong. She shows great wisdom as she dealt with Ruth in her life and guiding her into the system of the Jews and the customs of the Jews and the culture of the Jews in order for her to be able to find a husband. She suffered a great deal. First of all, they suffered the loss of income and had to go to another country, a foreign country, a pagan country, in order to be able to find the wife to live with. She lost her husband and her sons. I feel that I really have a love of my heart for those women who have lost their husbands. My mother spent some 20 years as a widow, and it really, I felt for her. When she came back to Bethlehem, she asked her relatives to call her Mary, and that name means bitter. God has dealt with me bitterly. And she had a great knowledge of law. She was well trained and well schooled. Let's look at Ruth. She was the main character here, Gentile woman. The comments that I have there would be an example, but I think she made a commitment, and the example she set is great for us. She was obedient to her commitment. She never forsook Naomi. She was a hard worker. She went and gleaned in the fields from sun up to sundown. And by the way, that was according to the law, that when a person was gleaning their wheat or grain out in the fields, they had to leave some in the field for the gleaners to pick up for the poor people. And can you imagine the culture that she would have to adjust to? From coming from a pagan nation into a Jewish nation, to accept all the laws and things of the political system. I thought about that for a long time. And what would we be like if we had to go to a foreign country and accept the culture of that foreign country? I thought about that for a while. One of the things that missionaries tell me, and almost universally, that when they come back from visiting, working in the foreign country in which they are, they tell me the hardest thing that they had to deal with was adjusting to the culture of that particular country. What about Boaz? Oh, a rich man. A man that was a relative of Naomi and therefore a relative of Ruth as far as that was concerned. The Jews had a law that was called the Levirate law, Levirate law. And that law was that if a man died before he and his wife had any children, the nearest relative had to marry that woman in order to be able to preserve the seed of the lineage of his relative. But Boaz was not the nearest living relative, and he fell in love with Ruth. He fell in love with Ruth. And in falling in love with Ruth, he went to the nearest living relative and said, "You're next in line." And the man said, "I'll take it." Then when Boaz began to describe the circumstances and everything else involved with it, the man declined. And Boaz had 10 witnesses there that he had, and got the man to sign a piece of paper saying that he declined this particular portion of the law. So Boaz married Ruth. Okay, that's the history. That's the concept of the story of Ruth. A great love story between mother and daughter-in-law. A great love story between a mother and her husband and the children that she had. A great love story as far as Boaz and Ruth is concerned. But what is the purpose? How does this deal with the history of the Jewish people? Very simply. Boaz and Ruth had a son. That son's name was Obed, O-B-E-D. And Obed had a son by the name of Jesse. And Jesse was the father of David, who sat on the throne, and Jesus inherited by lineage the throne of his father David. So there's a thin line that went through the entire thing. A thin line. I see this in God's great plan as far as His people are concerned. I think by the fact that Ruth is mentioned in the lineage of the genealogies of Jesus in the book of Matthew, then God intended to be able to show the Hebrew people that they weren't so exclusive that a Gentile could not be a part of that. And as you think of it, there were other Gentiles that were involved with that. Bathsheba had a son. And that son was a part of the lineage of Jesus. And as we think of this, God is saying to the world, when Jesus comes in the world, He's going to fulfill that promise I made to Abraham, that the seed of Abraham will be a blessing to all people, all nations. I also think, as I think about this, that the things that they suffered were a part of God working His plan. Think just for a moment. If there had not been a famine, Ruth and Elimelech, Naomi and Elimelech, would now have gone to Moab. While they were there, they had 2 children. If they did not live in Moab, they would have never met Ruth. And Ruth would never have made her commitment. And if children had not died, if Chilion and Mahon and Elimelech had not died, they would not have gone back to Bethlehem. And if they had not gone back to Bethlehem, Ruth never would have married Boaz. Boaz would never have a child by Ruth by the name of Boaz. David would not have been born. And the throne of Jesus' father David would not have existed. Now, I might be carrying that a little bit too far, but I see God using the tragedies in life to be able to fulfill His purpose in bringing Jesus into the world. Now, I want you to think very seriously about it. Because I believe, without a shadow of a doubt in my mind, that if you're a Christian, God has a plan for your life. I don't care how old you are. I think I'm older than anybody else that's here, maybe except maybe for Paige. God has a plan for your life. Somebody asked me the other day why I still preached. I'm not going to say who it was, because I wasn't Dr. Monday. It was the doctor that asked me. And I said, because I think God has a plan for me. And I think that plan is to preach. God has a plan for you. Maybe the things that happen in your life can be God trying to bring out His plan, that you might fulfill the plan that He has for you. I wonder if as I think about it, as to where we fit into the jigsaw puzzle of life. What is our piece? What is our part? What is the heritage that we're going to leave? What significant thing can we do? If you're a mother, it might be that your heritage lies in your children. If you're a child, if your mother is still living, it might be in your relationship to your mother. But what is the plan for your life? I think of the song, "Take my life and let it be consecrated, O Lord." And may we find that purpose. May we find the strength to fulfill that plan that God has for us. We're going to be singing our song of invitation. Just as I am, if there's need to make a decision for Christ, we ask that you come as we stand, as we sing.